everyone. Welcome. I'm so happy to see you all here. Welcome to the 2023 Black Mountain Institute PhD Fellows reading. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jaquira Díaz, and I'm a Spring 2023 Shearing Fellow at the Black Mountain Institute. This spring, I've had the pleasure of meeting some of UNLV's brilliant and talented PhD students. I've shared space and conversations with them, and I'm so excited to celebrate them tonight and to hear them read from their work. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones or any other electronic devices. With you, we would first like to acknowledge that UNLV operates from the city of Las Vegas, traditional homeland and unceded territory of the Nuwuvi, or the Maupa Band of the Paiute people. We encourage everyone in this space to engage in shared stewardship of the land and active learning about historical realities of colonialism and the indigenous peoples who continue to work and live on this land since time immemorial. First up, we have Dorothy Allred Solomon reading nonfiction.
Thank you, Jaquira, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to read a piece from Home Fires. It's the book I'm working on for my dissertation. Meet the rest of your life. I met you on the first day of the very school I fought against attending because people there might remember my family. I was downright rebellious about leaving Irving Junior High where no one knew us. Such exposure was the fault of my mother's twin sister, and by default of my father, and by default of my mother, who refused to stand up for herself. My heart ached as I dragged out after Jean, the friendly neighbor who had promised to introduce me around. You were there, kicking your locker shut with a fury that made me step back when Jean said, "Bruce, meet Dorothy." You turned, and when I looked into your blue eyes, deja vu, I recognized you. You were tall for a ninth grader, broad-shouldered, lean torso, a petulant mouth I wanted to kiss, even though I didn't do much of that just yet. You said, "There you are." You had recognized me, too. Thankfully, nothing much happened for a while. It wouldn't do to have anyone get close enough to unearth our family secret. After Christmas, Gina and I walked to Dawn's house. Dawn's parents led dream workshops, but the dream interpreters were not at home. So we came to help her make something. I don't remember what, because the doorbell rang. You and your best friend, Paul, stood on the porch. Jean grabbed Paul's hand and disappeared. You stepped into the foyer and smiled down at me. "I want you to be my girlfriend." I shook my head. "You have a girlfriend. I'll take care of that right now." You strode past Dawn into her parents' bedroom as if it belonged to you. Dawn crowded behind, and I trailed after saying, "Please don't do that." But you were picking up the receiver of the Blue Princess phone and calling Carolyn, the most popular girl in the ninth grade, destined to be student body president, homecoming queen, and lead in the high school musical, and Dawn's best friend. I could have stopped everything then, pressed the button to disconnect the phone, but I thought of my mother, of how her twin held it over our heads, that she had married our father first. So I did nothing. Dawn did nothing. She seemed pleased when you set down the receiver on his cradle. "That's done. Now you can be my girlfriend." You sat on the bed and patted the coverlet. "What does it mean to be your girlfriend?" I wish Jane and Paul would come back. "I haven't said yes, you know." You stretched out on the bed, presenting yourself like a gift. "Say yes." I stood still. Dawn moved to the other side of the bed, and she stretched out beside you. A female glove thrown down. I felt the challenge, and I stretched out too. You liked having a girl on either side and slipped an arm around each of us. This is heaven, you said. I should have paid more attention then, kept that moment at memory's brink, shaped my expectations around it. I wanted a different kind of life, and this felt too familiar. I couldn't stay inside that tender prison. Maybe our connection broke the Sunday my father was visiting the two wives in Montana, and my mother let me skip our religious meeting. You and I were listening to the Beatles and wrestling on the couch, and then I was on top of you, and the Beatles were yelling, "She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah," when my father strode in. We jumped up, maybe the only time I've ever seen you flustered. Terror seized me. Would you realize that he had come in from my aunt's side of the duplex? My father was agitated, his left eye twitching. Afraid of what? A stranger in the house? My behavior? I put on the old bright smile. We didn't hear you pull in, Daddy. You tried to get your mouth around an apology while my father went to the stereo, took off your Beatles album, and put a Book of Mormon record on the turntable. This is what we listened to on Sunday, he said. He retraced his steps down my mother's stairs, through the basement to my aunt's side, and out to his car. Limp with relief, I told you to go, right now. I didn't want you asking any questions. You were always getting me in trouble. I wanted to prove that Pliggy kids are good students and athletes and citizens, as our father exhorted. But I wanted to be a teenager, too. And most of all, I wanted to escape the patriarchal thumb. You wanted to read my diary and the notes I wrote to other people. You quizzed me every time a boy passing in the school hall said hello. You wanted to know where I was when I wasn't at the other end of the telephone. So we split up the last day of 9th grade without even asking. You cut a lock of my hair, creating a weird haystack on my forehead. In high school, I dated other guys. Then senior year, you asked me to your work Christmas party. We danced to soft jazz, and I didn't have to lead. I felt a window open in your mind, into your mind. 2 months later, you gave me your class ring, and I promised to swear off other guys. A month after that, you were talking marriage. That's when I got nervous. For many reasons, the main one being that you didn't really know me. You'd been honest, told me about your father, that your mother threw him out for dallying with other women, that you didn't know if you were legitimate. I knew I was illegitimate, despite my parents' spiritual marriage. So I mustered courage and told you we need to talk. We parked on Skyline Drive overlooking Salt Lake City, the clear night displaying jewels in the bowl of mountains. What is it? You wanted to get the talking done and start kissing. My heart hammered and my eardrums. My lips stuck to my teeth. I have to tell you about my family. I've only told one other person because I knew she wouldn't tell. And if you tell anyone about my family, my father could get arrested and go into prison again. Can I try? I know what it is, you said. What? Your father has 2 wives. How had he figured it out? Why hadn't you told me? You let me suffer all this time. Wrong, I snapped. He has 7.
Next up, we have Tania Shirazi Galvez. Give it up for Tania.
Hey y'all, very grateful for this opportunity. See a lot of familiar faces here, so thank you all for coming. I'm gonna speed read because I have 5 minutes. This is Girl Power. We're brown girls with Spice Girl stickers on instrument cases, textbooks, all loners. We say she's on her rag when one falls out of form. We wrap sweaters around our waists when it's that time. We ask each other for checks, stand on our tippy toes. Girl, am I good? We are good. We pose for mall glamour shots with matching tops, our baby faces unsmiling. We watch Pokemon while we log on and lie about our age, sex, location. We ask Jeeves questions we will not ask each other. We steal Cosmo mags, we hide in binders, label them required reading. We shrink with our mothers when they're on Atkins Great Food Diet Master Cleanse. We say we have done more or less with our body, depending on who asks. We scrape off baby, ginger, scary, and sporty with quarters when we return what we borrow. We associate the word sexy with power much too early. We hold it anyway and burn. We burst. Our fits and laughter turn into fits. Girl, you good? Girl. Sorcery. Woman's regular bleeding engenders phantoms. Paracelsus. The first time I bled, I was a sorceress. Inside of the girls' bathroom were my mother's black fishnet stockings, a bloody mess. While Mr. G wrote PEMDAS on the whiteboard, the softest part of my belly turned into my grandmother's pinned cushion. An invisible hand pricked pointy pins against my insides, vexed and hexed. This is the first time my body betrayed me. A body that will grow to want, a body that will learn to beg. At 13, a body that wants to bring knees to chest and plead, please stop, to the widening hips, the growing breasts, the marks that deem girlhood gone. Holding myself, I stomped out of class in my mother's heel, not yet mastering how to shift the weight of my body past schools, cheerleaders, witches, monsters. Halloween is the perfect time for an 8th grader to play at being more than just a girl. On weekday mornings, the light coming from the bathroom would lure me out of my bedroom. I watched bleary-eyed as my mother lined her brown eyes with charcoal black, her lips with a bombshell red. With her eyebrows furrowed, she'd run her fingers through her curly hair. I'd wince as she tore through the tangles at the nape of her neck. Before she pulled her uniform top over her shoulders, she fastened her frame into a girdle that held her in for her workday. From her, I learned how to hold my breath, baited. To a girl, a mother is a warning or a wish for what's to come. That Halloween morning, my mother transformed into Elvira. Her blonde curls slid into a black wig. She traded her cashier uniform for a plunge neckline dress with slits on the side. When she finished her transformation, she turned to me, a fresh canvas she could mark. "Look up," she said, as she held my chin in her hand, applying the same stain on my lips. My mother's touch was foreign. In my 13-year-old mind, my mother was a woman held captive by girlhood. Her mistakes picked up like articles of clothing dropped in different rooms throughout a home after a long day. Me being her first mistake. My younger brother and sister, her 2 others. Brujas chulas. She blew a kiss at our reflection, mythical creatures who look more like sisters than mother and daughter stared back. This is the first time I see the resemblance. The way our lips had the same Cupid's bow, our thick, sharp, dark eyebrows, the button nose, the same dewy skin, our eyes dark, heavy with mascara and eyeliner. My reflection, it almost smiled. But no, I would not turn into my mother. "Dina, you're a mistress. I'm a sorceress," I said. The sound of the words felt good in my mouth. Disarming adults with them felt better. I had to be more than a girl, to be more than my mother. "Same thing," she said to the calculated cut. 13 is cruel, so cruel. At 13, I stopped calling her my mother and used her given name. At 13, I could meet her eye. My curves filled her dresses. I could slide into her heels. 13 is all wrath, rattles, wants, and whys. 13 is terrified. And at 13, my mother was a mirror I wanted to simultaneously blow a kiss to and break. She shifted her body away from mine. She left me alone when I stared at my own reflection. Where a girl with too much body, too rattled and foreign, stared back. Monstrous. I had been warned, but not by my mother. She revealed to me other parts of womanhood, the fawning, the sensual, the romantic, the dramatic. The warning about menstruation came in the 5th grade. Before my uncle signed my parent consent form, he read it twice. He paused, not wanting to know more than he had to. He settled into asking me if my teacher was a woman. Yes, I said, but what I did not say, Miss S was a God-fearing woman who caught 2 classmates of ours kissing in the supply closet and let the boy run out and held my friend L by the elbow, bringing her down to her knees. Called her a slut, loose. She pointed to us girls. Listen, nobody will buy the cow if they can get the milk for free. She detailed the difference between a whore, a slut, and a bimbo. Girls who go on ahead and ruin themselves. We were 10. Better for them to teach you about those things. My uncle signed the form quickly. Miss S didn't teach us that lesson. That day, we left our classrooms and huddled into 2 rooms. The girls went one way and the boys the other. When there were those whose parents didn't sign the slip, mostly girls who were sent to the auditorium to watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The other third of us were in fits of giggles, anticipating the lessons that would help us understand our bodies. The disparate smells, the growing hairs, where there was smooth skin before, the suggestion of puberty spilling over our eager eyes. Hungry. Straight-faced facilitator still embraces inserted a VHS tape into the VCR. A Barney-like song introduced the instructional video that featured white girls who looked nothing like us but like each other, all wearing the same type of Fruit of the Loom unisex t-shirts in different colors. Diagrams of the fleshy parts of our insides named words our mothers blushed and called our privates. I recall the words uterus, cervix, fallopian tubes. What my 10-year-old brain gathered in a week's curriculum, my body will bleed. This will be the first time I will associate relief with bleeding. What we learn manifested in child's play, playing pregnant, playing labor, playing mothers. During recess, we would ask each other if we found puberty marks. We compared notes, and then we taught each other lessons. Thank you.
Next up, we have Dominque Conway reading nonfiction.
Okay, this is an excerpt from my memoir called Far From the Tree. Bear with me because my voice is going to shake. I'm not good at reading out loud. Okay, looking at the many photos that I've taken of abandoned and collapsing houses in West Baltimore made me wonder about the people who once inhabited those spaces. What were their lives like? What were their dreams, their struggles? I believe if I gaze long enough, the stories will unravel, revealing themselves amid the rubble. I imagine it to be a somewhat familiar tale, beginning with a trip by train or car from North Carolina or Virginia. Grease-stained bags contain food prepared by mothers, grandmothers, and aunties to sustain the travelers. There's no dining car for them, nor are there comfy rest stops where hamburgers and pie are served up with a dose of humor or hospitality. Even their final destination, Baltimore, was segregated. Yet, Aunt and Uncle so-and-so had sent word, pack your bags, come on up. There's work here, in the steel mills, at Domino Sugar, or as cooks and domestics. No matter, it's work and they're paying. Come on. The cold air of the city in the winter was probably not much of a shock to them because their former homes were still close enough to Baltimore to share a similar climate. Maybe they ignored the chill wind of racism, maybe not. But it was not the hostile climate of home with the beatings and lynching of Black folk and plethora of unwritten and written social rules that caused their eyes to be always lowered as their lives sank into earth that never yielded a profit for them. In Baltimore, things were different. A woman and man could make a living, buy a house, raise children with a bit of hope, even lift their heads skyward to dream. I doubt that many among them knew that Gilmore Street and the housing project Gilmore Homes that was erected in 1942 to accommodate the families of Black soldiers and the Southern migrants was named after a Confederate, Harry Gilmore. Probably few of Baltimore's current residents know this fact. While some names tend to be remembered, the recollection of deeds fall away with time. My son Zachary once mounted a campaign to change the name of the housing project to Tubman Homes, though few residents cared because what they really wanted was a way out of the neighborhood and their misery. Still, the city has long honored white supremacists and their lost cause with monuments. Chief Justice Roger B., that's B as in Blacks have no rights which the white man was bound to respect, Taney, sat cast in bronze as if in a drunken stupor in the middle of Charles Street until 2017, when the city removed the statue and several others after they got wind of a plan I had hatched with some comrades to rid us of those grotesque testaments to white supremacy. But then I imagine that segregation kept Black folks out of those communities where these bronze sentinels helmed, unless, of course, one was scurrying through to cook, clean, or drive for the white folks. Block after block of mostly red brick houses, laid out row after row, with humans placed tightly side by side, is a contrast to the space that country living had afforded the descendants of formerly enslaved people who spilled into the city in the early 20th century. I wonder if any of them shared or shivered in remembrance of a distant time when their ancestors were packed in a similar fashion. Perhaps some shuddered at the realization that this place, Baltimore, was not so different from their former homes at all. These tight quarters were, however, accessible and affordable, at least in very specific neighborhoods. The flight of their white neighbors, however, was a premonition of things to come. As I tried to imagine Baltimore through the eyes of these Black folks, I wonder what they would think of this ruin that once was home. Dion Brand, in A Map to the Door of No Return, Notes to Belonging, states, for some, to find beauty is to search through ruins. I suppose that my incessant curiosity about these spaces and the people who inhabited them is a result of my desire to find the beauty that I know exists in the midst of it all. Brand further asserts that desire, too, is the discovery of beauty as miraculous, desire in the face of ruin. Well, to be a person of African descent in the United States is to know ruin, to examine its countenance up close, recognizing in the lines and creases the faded beauty, to experience desire amid the rubble. I'm left to wonder how many lifetimes of savings have gone into these empty shells and piles of debris, lonely fields that previously contained rows of houses. Where are the children who once sat on the white marble steps, full of their parents' hopes and dreams? Perhaps if I concentrate, I can hear the sounds emanating from the many block parties that were held. If only I could summon the energy that propelled these folks forward, reclaim it from the various places of dispersal, graves, prisons, and suburbs that have no use for it, and let it warm these spaces that have become so cold, so barren. Thank you.
Next up, we have Miranda Hanish reading Literary Scholarship.
Microphones make me nervous. So I'm BMI's Literary Fellow, so this will be a little different. I study the early modern period, and so Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, Christopher Marlowe, and I also study the ways these playwrights are getting revived and reinterpreted. And one of the revivals I've been really interested in recently is the linguist David Crystal sparked this brief movement to rediscover early modern English. So the particular pronunciation of English, which we think was common in Shakespeare's day. And so it's distinct from received pronunciation, sort of BBC English that we've all usually heard Shakespeare in. And so being alert to this original sound of the language can really open up the poetry because it's the ancestor of all of our modern Englishes today, right? And if we're listening to it, you'll notice all kinds of differences. Different words rhyme, so love and preuve, love and prove. The word hour is pronounced or, and unlike received pronunciation, there's an R sound, just like we have in American English. So I wanted to read for you a short excerpt of Shakespeare in early modern English. It's a monologue from the very beginning of Shakespeare's Henry V, one of the plays I study. And the speech is about the power of poetry, the power of the imagination. It's a speech in which the chorus wishes that a muse of fire and vast spaces would appear in order to help tell a grand story. But since we lack those things, the chorus instead asks all the listeners to take what they hear and imagine everything that they can't see, to imagine that the vast kingdoms of England and France are in a single building, to think that we talk of horses, that you see them, and that you see their hooves pressing into the earth. And so it felt very appropriate to me for what all of us are doing tonight, both because we're paying very close attention to the importance of sound, but also because we're sitting in this ordinary building, listening. And so every reading is this kind of joint magic act. It's spoken by the readers, but then it's conjured by the imagination of the audience. So I'd like to share this with you now. This is in the original pronunciation. Begins, "Oh, for a muse of fire. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Well, then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his ales, leashed in lagoons, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, and gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or can we cram within this wooden O the very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt? No, pardon. But since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million, so let us, ciphers to this great account, on your imaginary farces work. Suppose, within the girdle of these walls, were no confined two mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutton fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. Into 1,000 parts divide one man, make imaginary puissance. Think, when we talk of horses, that you see them, printing their proud hooves in the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass, for the which supply. Admit me, chorus, to this history, who prologue like your humble patience pray, gently to err, kindly to judge, or play. It's a little of early modern English. I hope it's fun for you. Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Arij Qureshi reading fiction.
Thank you, Jaquira. Thanks everyone for making it tonight. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't sure I was going to make it tonight. The comp exams for the PhDs are really something. Dorothy, you know what I'm talking about. And shout out to everyone watching on Zoom, especially my parents. You guys never miss one of these. And I think that's really cool. So I'm going to read an excerpt of a short story titled At the Cost of an Other. That's 2 words, an other. The young mother had awoken to relieve herself. There were many bathrooms in the shared holiday home, so she hadn't had to go far. This was good, because she didn't want to leave her child for long, even though her entire family was under the same roof and no child could be safer. Upon returning, she saw that the child was no longer sleeping, but sitting on the floor in the hallway, clapping her hands together. What she was clapping at ran the mother's blood cold. In front of the child wriggled a thick, black snake. Its forked tongue, dancing in and out of its slit of a mouth, flicked at the child's heels, making her giggle gleefully. Heart in her throat, the mother snatched up her child and, seizing a cane, struck the snake a decisive blow to the head. It stopped its wriggling and lay limp on the tiled floor. Uttering 1,000 hushed dua of relief, the mother laid the infant in bed. Then she wrapped the snake carcass, noting for the first time its slightness, in old newspapers. She went out and threw it in the garbage bin behind the house and then returned to her room. As far as the mother knew, the matter was ended. But the story doesn't end there. The next part would be unknown to all human souls for years, save for one. That one was the mother's father, the child's grandfather. He, like the rest of the household, was asleep the whole while, but he was awoken by the smell of smoke. The elder turned his head towards the door. It was shut, but by his bedside stood a tall, stately-looking janab in a night-dark sherwani. Most people would have taken this janab for an ordinary man, albeit draped in finery. But to people such as the elder, who had lived more years than most and encountered many others of his kind, his true nature was evident. It lay in the wild arches of his tufty eyebrows, in the luminescent green of his eyes, in the stout knuckles of his hands laced and folded over his chest. This gentleman was a jinn in human form, one of many they can don. Your daughter killed my son. The child's grandfather had barely roused before these words were spit from the janab's snarl. Your daughter killed my son, and now there must be atonement. The elder rubbed an eye. Which daughter do you speak of? With the infant child, the child's grandfather cursed inwardly. The story was plausible. Denial was futile here. My daughter killed your son, he said carefully. So you have come to me for justice? A life for a life. This is our way. His voice was both a growl and a hiss. The elder knew that such a situation called for diplomacy, not aggression. In his younger years, he had served as a magistrate. But what common folk didn't know was that he presided over more than just worldly cases. He had had several dealings with jinn in the past. They regarded him, even if begrudgingly, as among the few humans worthy of their deference. They valued his arbitration and judgment. If he wished, the elder could have recited some choice incantations and sent the jinn fleeing into the recesses of the adjoining forest. But he knew that not only would this incur the jinn's wrath and prompt his tribe to vengeance, but that it would not be just. He knew that the janab was an aggrieved father. He knew he had come to ask which of his family the elder was willing to sacrifice to settle the score, and he knew that he had to choose his words wisely in order to save his kin from this fate. If my daughter killed your son, it must have been for a reason, the child's grandfather said calmly. I did not raise my children to harm indiscriminately. You justify the murder of a guileless child? No, I sanction the actions of a mother protecting her own. It is well beyond sunset. You know that we sleep during the night. None of my children nor theirs have stepped foot outside this house. What was your son doing in a known human dwelling, unbidden? My son posed no threat to the child. He was only playing. It was your daughter who struck him with no second thought, then disposed of his body like waste. The janab's hands were now at his sides, forming fists that swelled unnaturally. Still, the elder remained composed. My daughter cannot be expected to know this. She has been away from her homeland for years, begun a new life in the West. She could not have recognized your son for what he was. She was protecting her child. You would do better to ask yourself why you had not done the same. Why allow your son out of your sight? You and yours know that this has been a human dwelling for centuries. My ancestors built this house without trespassing on your land, nor displacing your people. Though my daughter dealt the killing blow, you must assume some responsibility for your neglect. Had your son learned not to trespass, this may have been avoided. A parent can never be neglectful. The child's grandfather paused to allow the Janab to retort, but he did not. In the way his eyes simmered, the elder saw that he accepted this reasoning. Please take your leave in peace now. I will mourn your child with you, but this is the most I can offer as amends. Spilling any more blood tonight would not be just. The Janab complied, and the room stood still and quiet. The elder went out and retrieved the roll of newspapers shrouding the Jinn child's body. He buried it in the garden and prayed for its ascension to paradise. Then, the elder made the only mistake he would make that night. He resolved to not tell his daughter about what had transpired in his room. It would trouble her needlessly, he decided. This was a mistake because, you see, the Janab did not leave the home straight away. As he stood on the threshold, facing towards the forest where his kind lived, he contemplated his next move. Thank you.
Next up, we have Jumi Bello reading nonfiction.
Hi, I'm really nervous. I just wanted to say some things before I read this excerpt to explain the context of it. So I'm reading from a memoir that I'm writing about my experience as a Black woman living with schizoaffective disorder. And I address this excerpt as a letter to my father after he involuntarily commits me to a psychiatric ward. This story is for any Black woman like me, anyone who's ever been made to feel like this life of theirs was nothing, for anyone who has ever dared to swim down the great river of wound that runs through us all. If you have ever felt that, swam that river, then this story is for you too. Dad, it is my great fear that one day I may flicker and then disappear from sight. One morning I will be in this world, and then suddenly I will be going, then gone. I worry I may leave the stove on. The bathroom faucet, it will be left running with a toothbrush laying abandoned by the sink, the saliva on the bristles glistening. I worry that my husband S may look at me one morning and say in surprise, "I don't know what I was thinking," and walk out the door, never to return again. The university where I work to shut their doors to me because how contradictory for a mad woman to be a professor. Our family, too ashamed to look at me, would send me away to a home, some gulag somewhere I'm cared for but easily forgotten, which might as well be dead because what does it mean to be if you aren't visited, aren't remembered? I worry. I worry. I worry. I worry. I stay up at night, hungering for sleep the way you might hunger for the sweet flesh of berry in summer. I hunger for clarity the way a haunting reaches for the haunted, trying to find the story that finally feels finished. I understand why our family might say that a person like myself isn't the right sort of mad person. I don't fulfill the right expectations of how I'm supposed to behave. There are things about me that seem to contradict what it means to struggle to live with mental illness. I'm married. I'm someone's parent. I have a job. I'm a person who is needed. I'm not supposed to be able to articulate what I'm thinking. I'm not supposed to know that I'm sick, need help, that something immaterial about me is destroyed. I should be more lost than I seem, jobless. Friends should have abandoned me by now. I should be on the streets if I'm really trying to sell that my life is falling apart. I'm not crazy enough, lost enough, wounded enough to be the mad woman of their dreams, but I'm the mad woman of mine. I'm certainly the one of mine. You never ask me what makes me remain the daughter you seem to know instead of the woman you cannot recognize. There's a set of bottles in my cabinet that determine the nature of my days, whether I will remain a woman or be transformed to the mad. I look into the bathroom mirror and the mad woman watches me intently back. I almost want to extend my hand to her, press my hand and imprint a salted map of veins on the glass. Almost say, "You're not alone." Madness, too, can be a mirror. There are many days where I careen between the good and the bad. On good days, I take lithium and all is normal in my world. I cook breakfast for my kid. I kiss my husband before he goes to work. I myself go to school and talk about books and write papers. The day is rich and full of possibility. On those days, all is well. Those are good days. On bad days, when something happens or when the medicine isn't quite calibrating right, I can sense the membrane that separates myself from the world. It feels similar to the skin of a butterfly wing, and it's tender to flight. It stands between me and all feeling. On bad days, my membrane is a shivering sheet that lets all things slip through. I feel it ripple on the street. The bark of dogs and bodies and booze and sex bouncing together into a tornado of stimuli. On bad days, this world grabs me in its palm and becomes a fist. On bad days, it can take me several minutes to understand the words that are being said to me. Something about everything I drink. All it tastes of brine. I wake up in the middle of the night, halfway between dream and the urge to run. I taste the sweat in my breath, the dust of the desert sawing its way through my lungs. On bad days, I can't help but bite the hand that feeds me. On good days, I taste the blood of the sun in my veins. Food, it's a feast. All the glasses of the world spilling over into a splendor of plenty. On good days, I want to live. Each day I take medications. I take 4 pills a day. 4 pills in the morning and 2 pills at night. 1 for my depression, another for my delusions, 2 more to dislodge the urge to die. For such a simple thing, it presents many complications. What if I don't like it? Although I ask many different questions, the answer is always the same. Take the medication. I stare at my doctors for a moment and don't bother asking the question that's breathing between us. And what if I don't? I think about the people out there like myself whose bodies and brains are policed by what people believe to be normal. The mad, the deserted, the disappeared. I imagine they, like me, want to be well. If they're anything like me, they ache for the lives they had before. They want to go home, wherever that may be or mean. I imagine they, like me, feel an anger without a name, despair without a face, and wonder whether it's possible to walk this earth without being worn down by the ideas and beliefs of other people and how we're meant to think and feel. What would it be like, I wonder, to waken one morning and not have to call this doctor, go to this appointment, take this, and also this, and this only once you've had food? What would it be like to not have to file for disability and explain your worst moments to a stranger? What would it be like to simply be? I'm telling this story so that this story may slip past you and land in the hands of the misfits among us. If that is you, I'm writing for you. If you have ever emerged from a shattered home and thought everything about life to you looked kaleidoscopic, I'm writing this for you. If you ever dumped the shit of your life into a hole and then looked into the mirror without washing your hands, I'm writing this for you. I'm writing this for the boys with the souls of wild horses despite the world's many hot-handed attempts to break them into candor. I'm writing this for the girls who have drunk from that deep, long river of sadness that seems to run through us all, that moves down the bloodline from mothers and daughters through bottles and locked bathrooms and wandering women in the middle of the night. I'm writing this for the women who've looked into a flame and imagined it was their destiny to burn. What's frightening is how much easier it would be to simply sink into an abyss, to simply disappear. If you have ever tasted illness, have ever swum into the deepest of its lakes, you'll understand that it is a world with no clocks, no sense of running out of itself. And to you, I extend a hand to say, hello, and you're not alone.
last but not least, we have Xiao Cho reading poetry.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the last to read, so I want to thank BMI and Barrack Museum for hosting us, and thanks for coming out tonight to hear this wonderful collection of talented writers. I brought all my poems I wrote in the past year. As you can tell, I'm very diligent. I'm just going to read a couple of poems. This one is called Crossing Bainbridge Ferry. That's in Seattle. It has many sections, so I'm just going to read a few of them. 2. Inside, I sit with 60 other people. All we are lines on a chart, extend our infiniteness separately. Outside, the wind has shrunken the sea, the sky all surround us on the bow. We, in our blipness as dots, are free. 3. Some dude explains to his next row how poetry works in America. It starts with the word conferences and ends with events. The kid stuck in between them, his hoodie on his iPad, steals a look at me and makes an event out of our conference. 4. The pine shadows a bit bluer deepens. The sea to our hands, branches of sky opens between islands. Sun behind clouds, livid sheaves of beams grew my eyes a bit brighter. The lack of contrast. Last night I got lost in the city and stopped at traffic lights to look at my phone in front of a gray pile of sheets beside a hotel gate. The dark wind, the dense roof lines, the city light with colors. He rose up and realized I did not stop for him. Eyes dimmed, went back to measureless sleep. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm just reading Don's comments. I guess I'll read this section. All right, I'll read it really quickly. 5. I am giving hyperreality a chance, I pretend. Home is just over the hills of these isles, that we are going somewhere. That before me is a life I live, family and bamboo leaves for 20 years. Behind me is a dream, I'd write and teach poetry in a foreign tongue, plague and desert sun. Oh, sailish winds that entrance the whirling straits, folding glaciers into a sculpt of songs. Oh, floodstream and tidal surge, narrow seas and desolation sounds. How do you know my skin when I could only possess it? How do you speak while I could only betray my writing? How you have sunk in the ocean while I still sails. Eyes are moved, I see strings of trees ashore, billow to your lee. Row of white cottages, far and near, cave in each into each. And the last section. Like life, we are dropped off on this small island, given 90 minutes to explore before the next ferry comes to collect us. Some stuff themselves into rental cars in the nearby parking lot and drive all the way to the other side of the island. Some have nice hotels booked, who already has sent someone. Some run to bus stations to catch the next coach, while you and me, we strolled to the nearest beach and walked far enough to see the ducks by the shore and spend our last dime on poke bowls, a bit cold, in the first restaurant we saw. Now we are in the line for the ferry home, right on time for the sun out of clouds and warm through windows. All right, next one is called Leaving the English Department. It's a classic. Tonight, many roads in the city should be jammed. I hear the soft cold winds as I descend the stairs. They have put small roses at the crevices of the beams, one to another in unequal distances, looking. Somewhere the streetlights come up, blaze heavily the windows. People go on breathing into the heat with their faces. We pass each other. You make yourself not look at me. My heart breaks both ways. I shut the door. Very much behind me and ahead, the small pine cone stands in the middle of the road, its cruel contours against the thin moon. All right. Okay. I'm gonna read a prose poem. I never wrote one of those, but this is one of the times I wrote them. It's called Photons. The faster I travel, the slower time ticks for me, and we dreamed of each other at the opposite side of the earth. When? The book spines I carried all the way from China, peeling off freshly. Those, this morning, somebody has to ask, what is your age? This particular moment will be felt approximately 2 years later. Our timelines are recommended and therefore are never ours. Secretly, someone finally confesses to me at a water fountain that they dream about towering mosques and fire-breathing calderas they have never been to. I realize I do not miss home, I miss Neverlands. I dream and believe the bookstore I frequented as a child will survive whatever erratic weather the planet has in store for us. I feel safe when the texts stay there, no matter how much I run my fingers. To dream about a place is to wake up to a crack of time. In one of these chunky, hard-covered science books, I learned about photons. They travel 40,000 years to touch the blackness of our eyes at the speed of light. They themselves never age. Time stopped for them. I finally went back to China after 5 years, and the bookstore was gone. It had been gone for 10 years. Thanks.
Again, thank you all for being here tonight, and can we please give one more round of applause for all of tonight's readers? And good night.